Hello there, I'm Laura, your friendly neighbourhood true crime storyteller. Today we have a case that's as tragic as it is unexpected, with a few twists that honestly left me shaking my head. Before we dive in, do me a quick favour. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and drop a comment with your thoughts on this case. I love hearing what you think, and it really helps the channel out. Now, grab a cup of tea, or something stronger, I won't judge, and let's get into the story of a high school track meet that turned deadly. This is the case of Austin Metcalf, 17 years old, tragically killed during what should have been an ordinary school event, a track meet in Frisco, Texas, on April 2nd, 2025. That's right, a track meet. Usually the most dangerous thing at a track meet is pulling a hamstring. But in this case, buckle up. By the end of the day, one student was dead, and another was in handcuffs facing a murder charge. It's a story that shocked an entire community and sparked reactions far beyond Texas. So how does a sunny Wednesday morning of relay races and long jumps end with police sirens and crime scene tape? Let's break it down. Students from several high schools gathered that day at David Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco for a district track and field meet. Among them was Austin Metcalf, a junior from Memorial High School, there to compete or cheer on his teammates. Sometime around 10 a.m, an altercation broke out between Austin and another 17-year-old student, up in the stands near the team tents. Within moments, the scuffle escalated horribly. Austin was stabbed in the chest and mortally wounded. Emergency responders and athletic trainers rushed to help, but despite their efforts, Austin died from his injuries shortly after. Police quickly apprehended the suspect, another 17-year-old named Carmelo Anthony. No, not the NBA player, just a teenager coincidentally sharing that name. Carmelo attended Centennial High School and was arrested at the scene. Soon after, he was charged with first-degree murder. In Texas, 17-year-olds are considered adults for criminal purposes. So Carmelo was now in the adult legal system, facing very grown-up charges. The news hit the community hard. A high school honor student was dead. Another student was accused of killing him, all over a brief confrontation at a school event. It seemed unthinkable. But as details emerged, the story only got more complicated. There was grief and outrage, candlelight vigils, court hearings. The case grabbed headlines not just locally, but nationally. It sparked heated debates on social media and, as you'll see, some wild misinformation too. There were legal twists, doxing incidents, even bizarre swatting pranks targeting both families. This case became a whole thing. We're going to delve into all of that. What happened at that track meet, who Austin and Carmelo were, what the investigation uncovered, what the legal system did, and how people reacted, sometimes in shocking ways. Because this is a heavy story, I'll sprinkle in a little dark humour here and there, not to make light of the tragedy, but to keep us all from getting too weighed down. Alright, let's start by getting to know the two young men at the centre of this tragedy. Austin Metcalf was, by all accounts, an outstanding kid, 17 years old, a junior at Memorial High School in Frisco, Texas. He had a perfect 4.0 GPA and big ambitions for the future. In addition to being a top student, Austin was an athlete, the MVP linebacker of the Memorial High football team. Football was his passion. His dad even said it was his pride and joy. In the spring, Austin was working hard in track and field to improve his speed for football season. Friends described him as a natural leader, someone who could light up a room with his smile. He was also an identical twin. His brother, Hunter, was born just 2 minutes apart from him. They were inseparable. They did everything together, playing on the same teams, hunting trips on weekends, hanging out with family and friends. By every indication, Austin was a beloved son, a devoted brother, a hard-working teammate, and a loyal friend. He had a bright future ahead of him, a future that ended far too soon. Now, Carmelo Anthony, again not to be confused with the NBA star, was also a junior, but at Centennial High School, another school within the same Frisco Independent School District. He too was a student athlete, playing football at his school. But unlike Austin, Carmelo wasn't widely known outside of his own circle of friends. His academic record hasn't been detailed publicly, although a judge later noted he had a clean record and was doing fine in school. Importantly, it appears Austin and Carmelo did not know each other at all before that morning. They were strangers, just two students from different schools crossing paths by chance at the same event. There was no long-standing beef, no rivalry, no personal grudge, which makes what happened all the more baffling. So you have Austin, an honor student, an athlete, a twin, a generally great kid. And you have Carmelo, another student athlete, a kid who was basically a stranger to Austin. They crossed paths on the morning of April 2nd, and within minutes, everything went terribly, horribly wrong. It was Wednesday morning, April 2nd, 2025. The UIL District 11-5A Championship track meet was underway at Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco. It was a big event. Reports say over 100 students from 8 different high schools were competing. Each school had its own team areas set up, tents or reserved sections in the bleachers. Austin Metcalf was with the Memorial High School team, probably hanging out under the Memorial tent between events. At some point around 10 in the morning, Carmelo Anthony, a student from Centennial High, was sitting under the Memorial High tent. That area was reserved for Memorial students. Why was he there? No one is really sure. Maybe he was just looking for shade. Maybe he was chatting with someone. Maybe he didn't realize how territorial high school sports teams can be about their spaces. But Austin noticed the outsider. He went over and asked Carmelo to leave, telling him that the tent was for Memorial students only. It sounds like a pretty basic, even polite request. But according to witnesses, Carmelo didn't take it well. Instead of moving, he allegedly responded with something along the lines of, "Touch me and see what happens," while reaching his hand into his backpack. Now, just as a general life tip, if someone says, "see what happens," while reaching into a bag, it's never because they're pulling out a cupcake. It's usually bad news. Essentially, Carmelo was making a threat. Don't touch me, or else. Austin, trying to handle it, reportedly tried to physically escort Carmelo out of the tent when talking didn't work. According to witnesses, he tried to push him away, basically saying, "All right, if you won't leave, I'll make you leave." At that point, Carmelo allegedly escalated again, telling Austin something like, "Punch me and see what happens." It was like the two were trading dares, each one darker than the last. And then, in a flash, it happened. As Austin tried to shove Carmelo away, Carmelo reached into his backpack, pulled out a black folding knife, and stabbed Austin once in the chest. One stab. But it was devastating, reportedly striking Austin directly in the heart. Immediately after stabbing him, Carmelo ran off into the crowd. Chaos broke out around the memorial tent. Imagine the scene. Teenagers lounging around 1 minute, then shouting, screaming, and a sudden collapse. A track meet, one of the safest places you'd expect, turned into a nightmare. After being stabbed, Austin stumbled back, clutching his chest. He asked people nearby to get help. Then he collapsed to the ground. Coaches, athletic trainers, and bystanders rushed to him within seconds. Police officers and paramedics, some already at the stadium for security, responded almost immediately when the alarm was raised. When they reached Austin, he was unconscious and not breathing. Athletic trainers had already begun CPR, desperately trying to save him. Among those helping was Austin's twin brother, Hunter. Hunter had seen it happen. He literally held his brother in his arms, trying to staunch the bleeding with his own hands. Their father, Jeff Metcalf, later said, his brother was holding onto him, trying to make it stop bleeding, and Austin died in his brother's arms. It's almost too much to even imagine. Absolutely heartbreaking. Paramedics rushed Austin toward the nearest hospital, working on him the entire way, administering CPR, even trying a blood transfusion en route. But the injury was simply too severe. Despite everything they tried, Austin was pronounced dead, either at the stadium or shortly after arriving at the emergency room. One moment, he was a teenager laughing with friends at a track meet. The next, his life was gone. A day that should have been about friendly competition had turned into a nightmare. While paramedics fought to save Austin's life, police officers at the stadium moved quickly to track down Carmelo Anthony. He hadn't gotten far. Carmelo was found not far from the bleachers, still on the stadium grounds. Police arrested him without any major incident. During the arrest, they also recovered the black folding knife he had used. Carmelo had apparently thrown it under the bleachers while trying to run. But what stood out wasn't just that Carmelo was caught quickly. It was how he behaved once he was in custody. Carmelo wasn't quiet or defiant like you might expect from someone facing a murder charge. He was emotional. He was crying hysterically. And, incredibly, he confessed almost immediately without even being questioned. When an officer radioed that he had the alleged suspect, Carmelo interrupted and said, "I'm not alleged. I did it." He then went on, saying, "He put his hands on me. I told him not to." It seemed Carmelo was trying to explain, even justify, what he had done. As they escorted him to the patrol car, he asked officers, "Is he going to be okay?" Then, a few minutes later, he asked another question. Could what happened be considered self-defense? The officers noted that all of these statements were spontaneous. No one was interrogating him yet. Carmelo was just blurting it all out, sobbing and frantic. This wasn't the behavior of a cold, calculated killer. It was the behavior of a scared, overwhelmed teenager who had just realized he'd done something irreversible. Of course, none of this changes the fact that Austin Metcalf was dead, or that Carmelo had stabbed him. By midday, the tragic news had spread like wildfire. A 17-year-old had been killed at a school track meet. Another 17-year-old was in custody, charged with murder. The rest of the track meet was immediately cancelled. Students from all 8 schools were rushed back to their campuses. The stadium became a crime scene. Shock, grief, and confusion rippled through the community. Parents were frantic. Students were devastated. And across Texas, and soon across the country, people were asking the same question. How did something like this happen at a high school sporting event? For Austin's family, the nightmare was just beginning. His twin brother Hunter had to go home without the person who had been by his side since birth. Their father, Jeff, rushed to the stadium when he got the call, only to see his son being loaded into an ambulance, bloody and unresponsive. Despite the unimaginable pain, Jeff Metcalf later said publicly that he forgave Carmelo Anthony for what had happened. It was a profound act of grace, one that would shape much of how the Metcalf family chose to move forward publicly, even as the case against Carmelo began to unfold. After his arrest, Carmelo Anthony was taken to the Frisco Police Department for processing and then transferred to the Collin County Jail. He was officially charged with first-degree murder. Now, even though Carmelo was 17 years old, still a minor in most areas of life, Texas law considers 17-year-olds as adults for criminal purposes. That meant Carmelo was immediately facing adult-level charges. No juvenile court, no sealed records. He was staring down the very real possibility of decades behind bars. A judge initially set Carmelo's bail at $1 million. It was clear the court was treating this case with the seriousness it deserved. With bail set that high, it wasn't likely that Carmelo's family would be able to get him out anytime soon. So he remained in jail through the first couple of weeks of April 2025. Meanwhile, the community tried to come to grips with what had happened. Memorials and vigils were held for Austin. Students, teachers, and parents mourned the loss of a young man who had seemed destined for great things. News outlets covered the story extensively, and conversations exploded across social media. At first, the anger and grief were mostly directed at the situation itself. A talented teenager was dead. Another teenager had thrown his life away. It was heartbreaking. It was senseless. But as more details started to emerge, that raw grief and outrage started to evolve into something more complicated and, in some cases, more toxic. On April 14th, Carmelo's defence team went before the court and requested a bond reduction. They argued that Carmelo had no criminal history. He was a student athlete with good grades, and he had strong family support. Judge Angela Tucker, who was presiding over the case, agreed to lower Carmelo's bond. She cut it from $1 million down to $250,000. Still a huge amount, but much more attainable. Along with the reduced bond, strict conditions were set. Carmelo would be placed on house arrest with an ankle monitor. He would be under 24/7 parental supervision. He was banned from using social media. He was forbidden from contacting Austin's family, and he would have to check in with the court regularly. It wasn't freedom, but it was a chance to await trial from home rather than from a jail cell. By April 15th, Carmelo's family had posted the bond, likely with the help of a bail bondsman and collateral from friends and relatives. Carmelo Anthony was released to house arrest, and that's when things got even more intense. The news that Carmelo was out of jail spread fast, and it sparked an eruption of public outrage. For many in the community, it was unthinkable that a young man charged with murder, who admitted to stabbing someone, was allowed to go home while awaiting trial. The backlash was fierce. People flooded social media with angry posts. They organised protests, and they began targeting the individuals they held responsible. The first target, Judge Angela Tucker, the one who had granted the bond reduction. Online, her personal information was leaked. Her home address, her phone number, even details about her family. She was doxxed, as they call it. Threats began pouring in. People accused her of being soft on crime. Some even framed the decision in racial terms, suggesting that Carmelo was receiving special treatment. The threats got so bad that the FBI was called in to investigate. Authorities warned that harassment or threats against a judge could carry severe consequences, but the damage was already done. Judge Tucker needed extra security, and it was clear that this case had moved far beyond just the two families involved. It had become a flashpoint for larger cultural battles. Meanwhile, Carmelo's family faced their own wave of anger and hatred, and Austin's family, who should have been allowed to grieve in peace, found themselves caught in the middle of an increasingly toxic public spectacle. As the days passed, the Austin Metcalf case exploded across social media. It wasn't just a local tragedy anymore. It had gone national. In the court of public opinion, people quickly picked sides. Many saw Austin as a completely innocent victim and were outraged that his killer was out on house arrest. Others, however, viewed Carmelo differently. Some saw him as a young black teenager who might have acted out of fear and who was now being unfairly portrayed as a monster. The case quickly took on racial overtones, whether either family wanted that or not. It became a political talking point. Commentators and influencers jumped in. Some right-wing outlets framed the case as an example of lawlessness and a failure of the justice system. Meanwhile, others on the left framed it as another instance where a young black teen could be overcharged by a system that wasn't built for him. The tragedy was no longer just about two families. It was being used to support larger arguments about race, crime, and justice in America. And with that kind of spotlight came something else: fundraising. Very quickly, fundraisers were launched on both sides. Carmelo's family set up a legal defense fundraiser through a Christian crowdfunding platform. In just a few weeks, they raised over $450,000, a huge amount. A lot of that support came from people who believed Carmelo was being unfairly demonized, or who simply believed he deserved a good defense. At the same time, friends and supporters of Austin's family created a few GoFundMe pages. They raised around $250,000, money that went toward funeral expenses, scholarships in Austin's name, and support for his surviving twin brother, Hunter. It was heartening to see so many people willing to help, but it was also clear that the reasons for donating often depended on the story people believed. For some, Austin was the innocent hero. For others, Carmelo was the scared kid who made a terrible mistake. Narratives were being built, and those narratives were often shaped more by emotions and biases than by the actual facts of the case. And then came the conspiracy theories. Shortly after the stabbing, a fake account popped up online pretending to be the Frisco police chief. This phony account posted a fake autopsy report, claiming that Austin didn't actually die from the stabbing, but instead died of a drug overdose. They said he had fentanyl and MDMA in his system. It was completely false. The real cause of death was the stab wound to his heart. There was no overdose. There was no drug scandal. But the fake news spread like wildfire before it could be debunked. Millions of people saw it. And even though it was quickly taken down, the lie stuck with some people. On the flip side, another nasty rumour began circulating about Carmelo's family. A British tabloid claimed that after the fundraiser, Carmelo's family had used the donation money to buy a luxurious $900,000 house. That too was completely false. The family hadn't touched the donation money, and the house they were living in wasn't some new luxury purchase. But the damage was done. In both cases, misinformation fueled outrage. People who supported Austin shared the fake overdose theory. People who supported Carmelo shared the fake luxury house story. It was a mess, and sadly, it made things even harder for the two families, who were already dealing with unimaginable grief and stress. As if all the misinformation wasn't bad enough, the harassment soon turned very real. Both families, the Metcalfs and the Anthonys, became targets. Carmelo's family, for instance, received death threats. People showed up outside their home. Some just loitered and took photos. Others acted more threatening, pretending to be delivery drivers just to get close to the property. It got so bad that once Carmelo was released on bond, his family had to relocate him to an undisclosed location for his own safety. They essentially had to go into hiding. Carmelo's father also paid a steep personal price. After his name was leaked online, people began harassing his employer, sending angry messages, spamming their social media, and pressuring the company to take action. Eventually, Carmelo's father resigned from his job to try to shield his employer from the backlash. Imagine that. Not only is your son facing a murder charge, but now you're unemployed because of an internet mob. The ripple effects of that one violent moment at the track meet just kept spreading. Austin's family wasn't spared either. Although they mostly received public sympathy, they too became victims of targeted harassment. And even more terrifying, swatting. If you're not familiar, swatting is when someone makes a fake emergency call, like reporting a hostage situation, to send a heavily armed SWAT team to someone's home. It's incredibly dangerous. People have actually been killed during swatting incidents. On April 8th, just days after Austin's death, someone called in a fake shooting at the Metcalf family's home. Police rushed to the scene, only to find out it was a hoax. There was no shooter, no emergency. And then it happened again on April 17th. This time, another fake call claimed gunshots had been heard at Jeff Metcalf's house. Within minutes, about 20 officers descended on the property, lights flashing, sirens blaring. Austin's grieving father had to come outside with his hands raised, telling them, "We're okay, it's a prank." The police swept the house anyway, just to be sure, but there was no threat. Just a heartbroken family trying to survive an unimaginable loss, now re-traumatized by malicious pranksters. Jeff later said he stood there, helpless, watching officers storm through his home, searching for a non-existent gunman. After everything they had been through, now they had to endure this. Reports also suggest Carmelo's family may have been targeted by swatting attempts as well, though the details on that are less clear. In both cases, the families were being re-victimised, not just by tragedy, but by people using the internet to terrorise them. It's a grim reminder that nowadays, when a story goes viral, it's not just about public opinion anymore. It can turn dangerously real. It can follow people to their front doors, and it can make an already unbearable situation even worse. Both families were already broken. Now they had to live with the added fear that some stranger on the internet might decide to cause real harm. It's heartbreaking, and it's infuriating, because at the centre of all this noise were two families, just trying to survive their worst nightmares. About 2 weeks after the stabbing, something unusual happened. Carmelo's family organised a press conference in Dallas. They were working with a local civil rights group called the Next Generation Action Network, or NGAN for short. The goal was to speak publicly for the first time, to thank their supporters, to share their side of the story, and to call for a fair legal process for Carmelo. Leading the event was Dominique Alexander, a community activist and founder of NGAN. He was there to support the Anthony family and to help frame the narrative around Carmelo's defence. Now, what nobody expected was who else showed up at that press conference. Austin's father, Jeff Metcalf. Jeff later said he showed up because he thought maybe the two families could come together, or at least begin to find some kind of understanding. He said he wanted to hear, firsthand, what Carmelo's parents had to say. Maybe, somehow, find a human connection. But that's not how it played out. Before the press conference even officially started, Dominique Alexander noticed Jeff sitting quietly in the crowd, and he immediately called it out. Alexander announced, very publicly, that Jeff Metcalf, the victim's father, was there, and he said it was not okay. In fact, he told the audience that Jeff's presence was disrespectful to the dignity of Carmelo. He said Jeff wasn't invited, and he needed to leave. It got tense fast. Dallas police officers approached Jeff and told him he had to leave, or he could be charged with trespassing. Jeff didn't argue. He didn't make a scene. He simply stood up and left quietly, escorted out before the press conference even really began. It was an incredibly awkward and sad moment. Some onlookers felt bad for Jeff. After all, here was a grieving father, trying to listen, getting kicked out. Others agreed with the organisers, saying it wasn't the right place for the victim's family to be, that it needed to be a safe space for Carmelo's family to speak. Either way, the tension was thick, and the divide between the two sides only seemed to grow wider. Interestingly, after Jeff left, Carmelo's mother, Kayla Anthony, did offer public condolences. During her speech, she said, "To the family who experienced the loss, my heart truly goes out to you." It was a small but meaningful gesture, even though Jeff didn't get to hear it in person. Sadly, the day wasn't done delivering heartbreak. A few hours after the press conference, the Metcalf home was swatted again. Another fake emergency call sending police swarming to Jeff's house. The timing was suspicious, to say the least. It felt like retaliation for Jeff showing up at that press event. So not only was Jeff publicly humiliated trying to find common ground, a few hours later, he had guns pointed at his house because someone thought it would be funny or vindictive. Jeff later said that he had gone to the event with hope for a bridge between the families. Instead, he left feeling even more isolated and even more targeted. It was a devastating day, layered with grief, anger, fear, and the very real danger stirred up by the internet mobs watching from a distance. Just a couple of days after the press conference, things escalated again. A group called Protect White Americans organised a protest on April 19th, 2025, right outside Kuykendall Stadium, where the stabbing had happened. Their demand was simple. They wanted Carmelo Anthony locked back up. They were outraged that he had been released on house arrest after being charged with murder. Now, The name of the group, Protect White Americans, says a lot about the tone of the protest. This wasn't just a regular call for justice. It was deeply racialized. They were positioning Austin, a white student, as the innocent victim, and Carmelo, a black teenager, as a symbol of lawlessness they felt wasn't being punished harshly enough. Of course, when one group shows up with strong opinions, counter-protesters usually aren't far behind. And that's exactly what happened. People who oppose the racial messaging of Protect White Americans came out to protest them. It didn't take long before the situation turned chaotic. There were shouting matches. Tensions rose, and eventually 2 counter-protesters were arrested, one for pepper spraying a member of the original protest group, and another for aggressive confrontation. So, outside the same stadium where a teenager had lost his life, people were now getting into literal fights over the larger meaning of it all. It was like gasoline on an already raging fire. Now, here's something important. Austin's father, Jeff Metcalf, showed up at the protest too. But he wasn't there to join either side. He was there to shut it down. Jeff confronted the organizer of Protect White Americans directly. He told him, firmly and publicly, to stop using Austin's name. He told them they were only making the racial divide worse, not helping. Jeff's words were powerful. He said, "You're trying to create more race divide than bridging the gap. I do not condone anything you do." He asked them to take down Austin's photo from their flyers and websites. He made it very clear. This protest was not something the Metcalf family wanted. Jeff's stance took a lot of strength. In the middle of his grief, he stood up and said, "No, you will not use my son's death to push hate." I think that's incredibly admirable. And honestly, it says a lot about who Jeff is as a person. Eventually, the protest dispersed without any more major incidents, but the damage was already done. The tragedy of Austin Metcalf's death had become a national flashpoint. Not just about a stabbing at a track meet, but about race, justice, violence, and how society processes grief and anger. 2 young lives shattered, 2 families drowning in pain, and an entire community pulled into a national firestorm. When we step back from the minute-by-minute chaos of this case, a bigger and more heartbreaking picture starts to form. At its core, this story isn't just about one stabbing at a track meet. It's about everything that swirled around it. The way one moment of violence rippled outward, touching so many lives and sparking conversations that reach far beyond Frisco, Texas. First, there's the hard truth about youth violence. High school is supposed to be a safe space. A track meet is supposed to be about teamwork, school pride, and friendly competition. But in just a few seconds of anger and fear, everything changed. It makes you wonder, how many teenagers today are carrying weapons out of fear or pride or bravado? How many conflicts could be de-escalated if someone just stepped in? How much tragedy could be prevented if young people were taught better ways to manage confrontation? And then there's the legal side. Carmelo's team is setting up a self-defense argument. In Texas, self-defense laws are broad. There's even a stand your ground law. But even in Texas, you usually can't start a fight, escalate it, and then claim self-defense after using deadly force. That's something a jury will eventually have to sort out. Did Carmelo genuinely fear for his life? Or was this a massive overreaction to a physical shove? Was carrying a knife to a school event a sign that he was looking for trouble, or just scared in general? There are no easy answers. Meanwhile, the impact of social media cannot be overstated. The minute this story hit the internet, it stopped being a private tragedy. It became a battlefield. Misinformation spread like wildfire. People picked sides before they had facts. Both families got doxxed, harassed, and even swatted. It became clear that in today's world, tragedy isn't just something you survive. It's something you have to defend yourself through. And then there's Jeff Metcalf, Austin's father, trying again and again to choose compassion over anger, even after losing his son. Even after facing protests, online chaos, and fake news. He stood up and said, "No, you will not use my son's death to spread hate. No, you will not drag my grief into your racial agenda." That kind of grace is rare. It's powerful. And it's something I think we should remember long after this case fades from the headlines. Because at the end of the day, what happened here wasn't about political slogans or social media battles. It was about two teenagers. One, Austin Metcalf, a bright, hard-working, kind young man who lit up every room he walked into, gone forever. And one, Carmelo Anthony, another young man now facing an adult criminal system, haunted by one irreversible decision. Two families who will never be the same. No matter what happens in the courtroom, there are no winners here, only loss. And maybe if we're willing to listen, really listen, there are lessons too. Lessons about the danger of letting anger take the wheel. Lessons about how quickly life can change. And lessons about how important it is to choose empathy, even when everything in you is screaming for vengeance. Because if there's anything to take away from the heartbreak of the Austin Metcalf case, it's that violence doesn't just end one life. It echoes outward, forever, changing everyone it touches. Thanks for sticking with me through today's case. If you found this story informative or thought-provoking, please take a moment to like the video, share it with others who might find it interesting, and subscribe to Crime Chapter for more true crime deep dives. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.